Hello, welcome back to the Matt Phifer Experience. My name is Matthew Phifer. I am your host, and I'm here today with Frank McFarland. He is out all the way in North Carolina, and he is someone who I have connected with on TikTok, as I have with a lot of other people, other lawyers. And you guys know, if you followed me for a while, you guys know that I love finding good lawyers, good attorneys, good divorce attorneys that are a good fit for people who might be going through unhealthy relationships, who might be going through problematic, high conflict divorces, people who I would feel like I could trust myself with my friends, with my family. And so, Frank, thank you very much. Welcome to the Matt Phifer Experience. We were talking beforehand, and the only downside that I found with Frank is that he's a Carolina Panther fan. As you guys know, that I like the Cowboys and the Buffalo Bills. Frank, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into law and got on TikTok.
Yeah, I appreciate that intro, and I definitely, fortunately for you, you don't have to worry too much about the Panthers. At least with your teams there. But we're on the way back up, maybe in a few years. But yeah, I appreciate that, and that's exactly your description there is exactly why I found myself on social media or on TikTok in general. There's just so many people that are going through this, and you like as a lawyer, I see a lot of the problems with what people deal with in the system, what people deal with on this side. But when you're in it, and you're handling a case, you really can't give the type of feedback that you want to give. If you were talking to a friend or a family member or whoever it might be that's going through that. And that's really kind of what I've used TikTok as a sounding board to really say what I want to say, not what the client is paying me to say or what, what the court is asking of me or whatever those things is. And I try to be really, really practical, with that information. But the law itself, it was not it wasn't a clear path for me. I was working in the athletic department at my alma mater. I really thought, professional baseball, not playing. There was a day where playing was my future goal too. But I really thought I wanted to be a part, business side, sports management side. I wanted to be a major league GM. That was my dream from day one. And I started getting into the business world when I got out, and it just wasn't for me. Started working. I was started working for an insurance company, and I just absolutely hated it. I hated what I was doing. And it was probably about 2 a.m. one night. Ad pops up like law school admissions test. Sample, took it. I'd heard that pretty much my whole life. Like, hey, have you thought about being a lawyer? You argue. The arguing's kind of what I do, and it's really the way that I've always kind of grown personally. And took it, did well at it, and next day I made up my mind. And it's been that road ever since. And there's been a lot of different, peaks and valleys to that. I'd never really expected to be doing the type of law that I am right now, at that point either. But I really enjoy it now, and I feel like I have the opportunity to really help people, which is what that's what people go to law school for. But then in the end, it gets morphed into something else. But in general, that's really where the focus has kind of been, or where it's at now for me, for sure.
Yeah, we've had people on here before, and I have not met one single divorce. Actually, let me take that back. I've only met one lawyer in about 3 years who said, "Yeah, this is exactly what I want to do." Everyone else kind of backed into it. The one lawyer, Dennis Vetrano, he got into it, and I had him on a couple of years ago, and uh, in a very strange way, he got into um, family law because he wanted to help marriages, not necessarily because he wanted to end them. And so now, very much like he's online, giving people not just legal advice, but also advice just in life. And I actually am a huge advocate of, even though my background is in therapy, and I have a very similar background to you. I was in sports and coached college basketball for a while and things like that. But I actually advocate for people before they get married to speak to a divorce attorney first. And people are like, why would I do that? Because they think that you should only go to a divorce attorney if you want to end things. And I've been very a huge advocate for prenups and things like that. Not necessarily because of you're going to lose half of everything, but I tell people that even in a healthy marriage, even if it's good, all marriages, all relationships end either in death or divorce, one of the two. And in either way, it's important to be prepared. What are your thoughts on that? And do you get a lot of prenup clients and things like that?
Not enough. I mean, not
Mhm.
enough. I think there are so many that should that don't, and there is this stigma, associated with it. And I think that's one of the biggest things that, like in my personal life, and one thing that I can carry over on the social media is that aspect of it. Because, like for me, so I just celebrated yesterday my 9-year wedding anniversary.
Oh,
I
congratulations.
I have never, divorce has never been something that I thought about. Like I'm very happily married, but at the same time, doing what I do, if people come to me advice about marriage, it's not, I don't immediately go to my own experience because I know it's in the minority, of what people have gone through in that time. So, I would ask a lot of questions. Number one, like why, what is your goal in getting married? What do you want to do in this situation? And it depends on what state you're in, but there may even be reasons to not get married at all. Have your ceremony even, depending on your state. And only a North Carolina licensed attorney. So in North Carolina, we don't recognize common law marriage. And I know that's a distinguishing thing across the U.S. But if your state doesn't recognize it, it doesn't really have that effect, of a marriage where you'd have to go through a divorce after. But what is your purpose? If it's a religious purpose that you're getting married for, why do you need the state to recognize it? And I think um, prenups are another part of that conversation that could do the same thing. You could do the same thing through getting married and having a prenup. But I would just ask, like, what is your goal? Why are you getting into this marriage? And far too many people are getting married for the wrong reasons. And, in the end, they're like, that's why my business is so, like, I don't have to market a ton on my business side. Like people are going to get divorced, they're going to need a divorce
Yeah.
attorney. And, I've posted videos before and people have commented like, this is just like a lawyer, you're stirring up the conflict. Lawyers don't have to stir up conflict between people that are married.
No.
It happens naturally all the time and people change. And I do hate that they go from so much of an extreme to the next. Like, you cared so much about this person that you got married and now they're your least favorite person on the planet. I've always kind
Mhm.
of felt this disconnect with that idea and concept, but it's a reality. I mean, I see it every single day.
Yeah. You were you were talking about how, asking people what their goal is, and that kind of alludes to something that I tell people who are looking for a healthy relationship, that relationships are built, they're not just found. That you can't just, it's not, especially when I'm working with someone who's like on the dating scene, and everyone's looking for all this chemistry and all this kind of stuff, and I'm like, that's not what you're looking for. Going back to exactly what you're talking about in terms of goals. um, from your experience, like what what would you say that someone who is especially entering a second marriage, because a second marriage, or someone who's getting into another serious relationship or has aspirations to get in one, what are some things that they might need to look out for, either red flags or maybe even some green flags that they should look out for, like in a potential partner or in something that might be healthy if they've coming out of something that may have been unhealthy previous?
Yeah, they probably know. Well, there's one thing that's a given here, and I see it all the time in cases too, but people gravitate towards people, the same kinds of people over and over again.
Yeah.
I do this in custody cases all the time. If somebody is screaming about how terrible, the new boyfriend is, let's say, well, then you probably want to check up on, your client's history if it's the guy. And it works the same way, on the opposite end. If the wife is screaming about how bad her ex-husband is and she's got this new boyfriend, it's just so frequent that those people will share those same characteristics.
Hmm.
And I don't know much about the science behind that or the psychology of it, but it's
Yeah.
what happens. It's what I see all the time. The people that really should, from their own personal experience, know what not to look for, in people when they're, back on the dating scene, are probably the worst at really recognizing and remembering those things. I mean, we know, the red flags. Everybody knows the red flags when they see them. They just choose to ignore them.
Yep.
Is the most part. There are there are toxic things that happen in relationships. You know it when you see it. You know when when there's anger issues, when there's, kind of like when you have jealousy issues, when you have trust issues, or maybe even the reasons behind those trust issues. When those red flags are coming up early on, it it's not going to get better. Those things don't magically improve once you have your big day, and you're
Yeah,
married. And
100%. I tell people all the time, like those beginning stages, the first 3 to 6 months, when you see those things, that is the best that it's going to get. And I've talked to people who, they've experienced cheating and things like that in the first 3 to 6 months, and then they're trying to work things out, or even going to like couples therapy. I'm like, that's not the time for couples therapy. That's time to end it. That's your get out card, not, let's see if we can, let's see, I tell people they haven't earned the right at that point to be able to go to couples therapy or anything like that. If you were 25 years in, or even 10 years in with kids and a mortgage, I can understand then. But 3 to 6 months, even up to a year, let's just call it quits at this point.
yeah, that's where that kind of what's your intention question comes up a lot, because is it, I'm too old, like I need to get married now because I'm not getting any younger, or this is the place in our relationship that we've gotten to. And when you say that, it's like I'm not I believe wholeheartedly in a person's ability to change. I believe that mistakes, don't necessarily define people, and that, they can make improvements and do things based on that. But if somebody has cheated on you, if you can ever really forget it or not.
Right.
And it really is that simple. It is not like you can't pretend to forget it, you can't store it away. I mean, you have to forgive, and ultimately really almost forget, and forget may be the wrong word, but forgive certainly. But it's not a fake thing, because when something goes wrong, and it will go wrong, if the first thought in the back of your head is, I bet they're cheating again, or I bet they're doing this again. Again, I know there are people out there that are happily married that have experienced some type of, cheating in the relationship on one side or the other, but it's the minority. It is such an extremely small percentage of what that looks like. And I just wish, understanding that concept, like you say, counseling after 6 months, come on. I mean,
Yeah. Hmm.
you know where it's going. It's just like I have people that come to me sometimes and they'll say, I don't know if it's the right time for me to leave yet. I don't know if it's the right time, but I'm having these worries or I'm having these concerns. And I'm really careful about not telling people, yeah, you should leave, or yeah, you should do those things. It's such a personal decision. But they always come back. They always come back. If I meet with that person and they're thinking about divorce and they're like, well, we're going to give it another shot, or we're going to work through this, give it a year. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe probably a few months, and they'll be back in the office with the same issues, and
Yeah.
maybe they're going to be worse.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Oftentimes it is worse because when they're in that stage and that other person feels it, I call it intensifying the relationship. All of a sudden, they want to have another child. They want to buy another house. They take out a second mortgage, and then it makes your job a lot harder.
Yeah, it
You know?
does. I mean, and I know that, like, when it comes to dealing with divorce, like when I deal with custody issues, I'm like extremely middle motivated. Like I'm thinking, I'm trying to preach to my client, this is about the kid. We need to reach a resolution for this child, because, like, forget about you. This is the court's asked to determine what's the best interest, and you should be too. Focus there. But divorce is such an opposite end of the spectrum, because it's a money question. It's all about money and how much you're getting out of this. You want it to be about, everything that went wrong in your marriage and everything that happened before. But in a money analysis, like, you have to try your best to disregard some of the emotions that you're going to be feeling. And that's not easy.
No.
But, I'm going to be way more matter of fact about, hey, this is a business transaction. Like, that's what divorce is. And you
Yeah.
have to make it that way when you're going through it, or you're going to lose,
Yeah.
you're going to lose something, whatever that looks like.
So I have to ask this question because it's been a little bit since we've had a male family law attorney on here. So every time anytime I post, and I know I see it in your comments, I see it in every attorney's comment section. Every lady thinks that everything is skewed towards the men, and every guy thinks that it's skewed towards the women. Why is there that perception out there? Is it true? Like, what are your thoughts on it? Do you feel like there's a bias towards men or towards women, or is it just this is kind of what it is?
Well, there can be. I mean, I think I would be doing a disservice to say there's completely no, at least stereotypical women advantage in certain situations, and maybe even the reverse, in certain situations. And lawyers look at it the same way. I've done some videos on this before. I think what the court really wants to do is, they're seeing hundreds of cases. They are never going to know all the facts of any case. You could have a week-long trial, you could have a 2-week-long trial. They're still guessing about a lot of those details. They're filling in a lot of those gaps. So what they end up doing is, there's certain like boxes that each case fits into. This is the Disney dad. This is the, whatever. This is the alimony case. This is the cheater. Whatever. Like they're just trying to throw these cases into those boxes, and some of them fall more stereotypical. I don't really think. I mean, look again. This is not to get into any kind of biology debate on what actually are the gender differences or are there gender differences, whatever.
Right.
Take all that out of the equation. But there are certain things that, when you look at more traditional households or more traditional, marriages, that these are what has happened. And because of that, you're going to find more boxes that fit certain genders when it comes to that. I don't necessarily think it makes it right, but it should, at least in theory, be more based on the facts.
Right.
And, it's like when you have a mom that takes the kids to school every day, that does all the household stuff, that does, that is providing the schoolwork, that's taking them to the doctor, that's doing all these things when it comes to custody, at least. When they're doing those things, yeah, I mean, it's stereotypical that would be, kind of these roles or these, presupposed roles, but it's also happening. It is literally happening. They are caring for more, more percentage of the time of the child. So that's why when I see people that are worried about those stereotypes one way or another, don't let them put you in the box.
Right.
Even if it means more work for you and that's unfair or whatever, it sounds stupid, but know the teacher's name, know the doctor's name if you're the dad. And the same goes for like in a divorce situation too. There are a lot of kind of similar things, that happen there. Like it is a definite, men filing for alimony, let's say, is one that is going to really have a stigma. And I think courts will order it, but are they going to be as inclined to order that as they would to a woman? They should be. I really think if that's the way these roles flip, then you have to have, you have to be putting that right case out there, to show that in the same way that a wife would, dealing with the same problem.
So I wanted to kind of transition that conversation to people who are going through divorce. When we look at some of the celebrity couples like Will and Jada, for example, they're obviously, debatable on if they're going through a divorce or not, because they've kind of gone back and forth over the last couple of days and weeks on what their situation is. But we really wanted to talk about what's happening with Jada, with her putting all of their private life out in social media, talking about everything. And let's just for the sake of argument, say that they are going through a divorce, or let's say that they do end up going through a divorce, 6 months, 2 years down the line. But this, even though that's a celebrity couple, that's something that we see. I know you probably see it every day. I know I see it every day online with people talking about their ex-spouse, their soon-to-be ex, and completely bashing them online. And everyone seems to feel very justified to do it. What are your thoughts on that? And what are some things, maybe pros and maybe cons, that might happen with something like that happening in court?
Yeah, well, when it comes to like what you're putting out there about your relationship, there's really these two. You really got these two competing interests. One is like your own personal well-being and kind of the catharticism the benefits to you emotionally, whatever, to share your story, to share your experiences, to share what you're going through. And then the flip side of it is this really something that I need to be sharing with everybody,
Right.
to the point of where, and like, everybody has their own truth, when they're going through a separation, when they're going through a divorce. And let me just touch on this real quick, because every state's going to be a little bit different about this. In North Carolina, you have to be separated for a year before you can file for a divorce itself.
Yeah.
And it's it's a little bit antiquated, but the idea being like, well, we want to give them a chance to reconcile. So we'll give them this year period and just make sure they're serious about getting this divorce. And a
Mhm.
lot of states will have a similar period, but then sometimes you can get around that if you have, grounds or causes. But in North Carolina, there's none of that. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what happened. You still have to wait out the year. And so we deal with a lot of people that are in this sort of weird gray area middle. And I get questions like, can I date? What should I say? Where am I in this? And when you see a situation like this, I mean, it just feels like such a train wreck with what they are doing in particular. And then you just have these weird, it's just, they're such in the public eye all the time. And when it becomes a story, they get asked about it even more. So, then I was reading kind of some stories like Will's asked to respond to what she's doing. And, it is it's not a good situation. It's
Right.
hard for me to imagine there being any real tangible benefits to doing it the way that they are. And there can be ramifications. There can be negatives that happen towards the person that is being said about, and there can be negative ramifications towards the person who's saying it. And, I kind of think about it like, if you're in a criminal case, like, the less you say, the more that can be, turned
Yeah.
around on you, the more that you have that area where you may misremember a certain detail or whatever. And when you're going through a divorce, especially a divorce that's going to involve the amount of money that one like theirs would,
Right.
you're going to find those answers. I mean, if you say, hey, this happened at this time
Yeah.
frame where this is going on, or this is what we were going through, the facts better back it up.
Yeah.
And if they don't, then I think you really could run into problems like maybe it's even a lawsuit, at that time or whatever. I mean, there can be defamation that happens in situations like this. In general, you're pretty safe in a divorce because of what I said before. Like, you have your own reality.
Yeah.
As long as you really believe this to be true at the time, it probably helps insulate you some.
Yeah.
I mean, God, look at even Johnny Depp and Amber Heard on that
Mhm.
line. I mean, even with all of that, there's no, you really don't have. I guess that is probably the exception, because
Yeah.
you do talk about a judgment there. But
I
look
think
how long it's
I
been.
think you really illustrated it really well earlier when you said that certain things can put you into like a certain category, though, in a certain like box where now all of a sudden there might be a bias. So if the other party, or if you're able to prove that the other person is just making things up and is just kind of slandering or just trying to discredit you or trying to discredit your business and things like that, I imagine that that could put you into one of those categories where maybe you were in one box that might have been favoring you a bit, and then all of a sudden now you're in another box where it's like, well, this person is no longer credible with me because they do talk a lot of crap about this person online, and none of this has really popped up, or they haven't been able to prove it, and and so is that something you've seen, or is that something that could happen?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think it's one that judges, like, there are times, a lot of times it comes with motions. You may file a ton of motions and they just keep throwing one after another. And then the court's finally like, look, we've been through this before.
Yeah.
You want me to believe this about this person, but you've told me 5 times that that's who they were and you didn't prove it.
So thank you guys for listening. This is Frank McFarland, and we appreciate you guys listening. Make sure you guys go into the comment section down below if you guys are listening or watching this on other platforms. Let us know how much Frank has helped you out, and let me know some things that you may have learned from this episode. With all that being said, thank you guys very much, and we will see you in the next episode. Have a good one.